Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Sunday Messages, or whatever it is that I have going on these days. So last night, I posted a clip talking about essentially how people are really attracted to mini vlogs. So what I want you to call to mind right now is when you're seeing some type of influencer and there's a mini vlog of like a perfectly curated cup of coffee and gym session and green juice and all of this stuff, right? And this comes in many variations. A lot of the time it is like a health thing or like a healthy morning type of vibe, but there's so many different variations of this. And one of the things that I was sharing in that clip is the reason why we're attracted to these things doesn't have as much to do with the tasks. It doesn't have as much to do with the journaling and the green juice and the whatever it is that you're seeing. It has to do with our desire for fullness. So this is taking more of a bird's eye view approach to the situation, looking at it a little bit more broadly. It has to do with our desire to experience fullness. And that's really what life is offering us every single day, right? So when we see someone on the internet having a really full experience, that is what we're attracted to, particularly when it holds similar interests. So if we're really interested in something and then we see someone who's doing a lot of it, it stirs a desire within us and we can feel that tug at our heart. And it's really interesting because I see a lot of people who have deep desires to do a lot of things, okay? And internet culture can make it so people become kind of confused about what needs to be implemented. So it's really interesting because there's a few different factors that are at play here. It has to do with what we think will bring us a desire and momentum. So it's really interesting because we have this reflection of fullness from watching people online, okay? And so if you're in a rut, if your life is not full, if you're in a habit of overconsumption, and so there's a very low energetic momentum at play in your life, and you're seeing something like that, and you're saying to yourself, I want that. That looks good to me. If you try to do something like run 5 miles every morning right off the bat, that's going to be really difficult to hold in the beginning because it's a momentum issue. And so what people are thinking is, if I am doing these activities, the activities are going to result in me experiencing the fulfillment. When it had nothing to do with the activities and everything to do with the fullness. Adding fullness to your life is what generates momentum, and that's what builds energy. And that's what we're really desiring in different areas of our lives, right? Because there's different flavors and textures of how this can really show up for us. And so what ends up happening is people see something they like, their aim is a little off. So then it feels overwhelming. And when they can't maintain that level of energy, they deem themselves, or they conclude that they're just unmotivated, that they can't do it, that they're not built that way, or this is too hard. And so the reason why people are coming to that conclusion only has to do with you approached it a little bit incorrectly or a lot incorrectly. And that's actually the problem. Because if you had approached it from an attitude and an idea of, I am aiming at fulfillment, I'm aiming at enriching activities, I'm aiming at building momentum, rather than directly at the activity. And you gave yourself time to really contemplate, well, what activities would make my life feel more full? What can I grab onto and really sink my teeth into so that I'm looking forward to doing it? Because if you're looking forward to doing it, no matter how small, it'll give you something to hold on to that you can sustain over time. And that's the bridge. So then after you are sustaining your momentum a little bit, then it can branch out into all of those other areas. Then it can branch into having the awesome morning routine and the workout flow and all of that stuff. It will eventually evolve into that. But if you're going from no momentum to doing the thing that is the most challenging, that your brain has the most resistance to, how could you possibly expect yourself to sustain something like that? That's like the hardest way to go about it. And so you want to take an approach of leaning into your own personal desires and doing things that you genuinely do enjoy. That way there's enough there that you're enjoying that you actually want to do it. And if you just have that one element, the one element of I want to do it out of pleasure, then it'll start to build that consistency, your trust in yourself, your willingness to show up for the things. And so I really want to encourage all of you not to just aim at the most difficult thing on the face of the planet that you have a whole bunch of mental resistance around, and then fail and consider yourself to not have the capacity to do it or to not be a consistent person. Because that may not be the case at all. And so instead, I would just consider what approach have you been taking with all of this, and that can really illuminate what's really going on here. So that was the first thing that I wanted to talk a little bit more in depth about based on the video that I posted yesterday. The second thing that I've been thinking about a lot is what happens when we consume information. So it doesn't matter if it's in book form, it doesn't matter if it's a podcast, it doesn't matter if it's anything else, YouTube video, whatever. When you are consuming, there's a feeling that it's productive. So if I'm gathering information, and in some contexts that is productive, right? It's not to say that there isn't a time and place to gather information. But what ends up happening is people are confusing productivity with overconsumption, because when you're consuming something and you're getting hyped up about it, there's a stirring of energy and then it feels productive. And it can be productive, but there's a tipping point where it's no longer productive and it's just gratuitous. And so it's really interesting because one of the things that I'm realizing about my work and the transition in my work is I'm moving out of information, not completely, but I'm moving away from sharing things that are more informational or theoretical and moving into things that are experiential. Because the experience is what fully integrates things. Okay, otherwise it's just a gratuitous overconsumption, filling your mind with information that never makes its way into application. And this is why there's no real movement for a lot of people, is because it just stays in the mental body and it doesn't go anywhere. And so the reason why I'm titling this whole thing Knowing Isn't Enough is because knowing isn't enough. In the same way, self-awareness isn't enough. If I was talking with a client earlier today about codependency and we were working through a few things, I can give her all the information and I can tell her exactly what to do. in order to establish a new pattern in her life. But if she does not take action on those things, if she does not flex the muscle of setting boundaries, then what good is the information if it's not being applied? Because you want to bring the information all the way through and put it into practice so that it gets integrated completely. Information just staying here isn't going to do you any good. You can know all the things and you can know all the stuff and you can know all the practices, but what good is it if you're not acting on it in some capacity? You're not integrating it. So in my work, and particularly, especially with a big kid school and everything, that the way that I've designed that is it's not lecture based. So I'm not lecturing at you. It's not, okay, go think about this. And most of what I'm seeing online in particular is a lot of thought. And again, it's not bad. It's just, well, what happens to the thoughts and what happens to the ideas, and what is the next stage of evolution for the thought that you have now been exposed to, or the idea that you think is a really good idea? What next? What are you going to do with it next? And so as I'm starting to shift into more of these experiential programs, if you will, my focus and what I'm seeing is the integration piece, the bringing it from thought form into reality is where people are lacking the most. And you'll see this a lot probably in your own life. I think we've all done it. I'm definitely guilty of this. Going online or listening to podcasts or consuming something, and you can get so hyped up. Like, yeah, that's such a good idea. I'm really into this, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I want to start doing this and I want to implement it. And there's just this transference of energy that occurs that you can feel from people. And so being connected to that feels really good to us. And that's one of the things that, is a blessing in many ways when it comes to the internet. But you'll notice that when you unplug from it and you actually move into your life, you're kind of overwhelmed or confused about where to start. Or you're wondering, why did I feel so good? How did I feel so hyped up in that moment? And now that I'm here, my vigor is gone. And so there's a misunderstanding, this idea that, plugging into someone else is where the magic lives. And that's not true. That's not true at all. It's like, first of all, yes, connection to God, always number one. That's always the most important thing. Being able to get juiced up on your own connection and your own source is the most important thing. But when someone else is speaking about something that is fully integrated in their life, they're embodied in it, it's fully landed, it's integrated. And so when you get that reflection of integration, it feels good. And this is why we're attracted to people who have integrated different skills. In the same way, the reason why you like watching professional athletes, aside from the energy of the game, is because they have integrated and embodied skills that seem superhuman, that are so powerful and so elite that you're captivated by the integration that they've experienced and that they're reflecting back to you. And we like that. When you go and you watch a live musician, the reason why there's so much magnetism of the performer isn't the performance, it's the integration. It's the harmonization with their connection to source, with their God, so to speak. And so when you really think all of that, my reason for explaining all of this is so that you can understand that when you're going into a situation and you're over consuming and you like the feeling of consuming from people who are deeply integrated, there's another piece of the puzzle that has to be clicked into place, and that piece of the puzzle is practice. So I don't know where this comes from, but one of the things that people say is it takes 20 hours to become proficient at something. So just basic proficiency takes 20 hours. So you can imagine someone who is in true mastery of something. They've spent the time bringing it into form, bringing it through the body so that it's fully solidified. And that's what you're picking up on. So the reason why people believe that plugging into information or plugging into other people is the source of it is just because of that integration reflection that they're receiving. When really, if you wanted that to be an enduring experience that holds over time, you would have to go into practice. Because to establish the same level of integration that that person who just got done hyping you up has experienced, you have to practice. You have to practice that. You have to be intentional with it. You have to bring it down. It can't just all live in the mental body. That's not enough. It's not enough for the level of depth that I know people are wanting to experience. So knowing is not enough. It's not enough. Things have to be applied at a certain point. And so let me see, there was something else that I wanted to mention here. Let me bring up my notes. I just jotted a few things down. Let's see here. So let's talk about momentum for a moment. Momentum, which is kind of where we started the conversation, right? Like generating momentum to get up at the crack of dawn and go for a 5-mile run, for example, that's going to be a very difficult place to start on day one. You can do it, but will you have enough momentum for that to be an enduring experience? I don't know. But this is one of the reasons why when people are talking about New Year resolutions, people quit by February because people are overly ambitious and they often try to take an approach to tackle something that has the highest level of resistance, that is the most difficult, and that is just like, maybe you'll make it, maybe you won't, but the numbers are, the statistics are that most people aren't going to be able to sustain that level of action, whatever it is that they're undertaking, if it's too extreme. So all of that being said, do not fall into the trap of thinking that consumption is enough, because understand that when you're listening to someone and you're getting really hyped up and then you move out into the world and the energy dies, that's because you have to integrate. If you want that energy to hold, you have to do the integration piece. That's what can't be, nobody else can do that for you. So, oh man, there's something else coming through about this. Hold on. I have it. It's on the tip of my tongue. Okay, so the other thing that you want to keep in mind with the internet in particular, and with consuming information and listening to podcasts and things, is your brain in the early stages of integration. Okay, so when you start something, that first phase is going to be where your brain fights you the most. So that's when it really, really, really is resistant to establishing the new pattern. This is why I seriously feel like we are underutilizing pleasure. Because if you can tempt yourself with something that is more enticing, and I've been talking about enticing enrichment. I've been talking about it on my Instagram. I've been bringing it up. It's like enrichment, enrichment, enrichment. Because that will, it's not even motivation. Motivation is usually something where it's like, I don't want to do it, but I feel motivated to do something I don't normally want to do. Motivation is such a loaded word and it's really unstable. However, if we're thinking in terms of what are you enticed by, that's a different conversation. And there's a different level of desire that you will experience to move in the direction of that thing. This is why enticing enrichment is the vibe right now, because that is like the key to consistency, in my opinion, and in my own life. It's like if you have the option between doing a workout that you freaking love and doing a workout that you absolutely hate, where is there less resistance? Well, it's going to be to the one you love, so you're going to do it more, and then evolution will take place. More momentum will be generated from that initial process that you're engaging in, or that initial movement forward will build momentum. So what was I saying? Man, my brain is all over the place. I feel like I'm talking about 6 different things. I was talking about when the energy dies. Okay, so again, what happens for people? Let's take a morning routine, for example. Let's say you want to have a really yummy morning routine. You go and you get inspiration from Pinterest and you list out all of the things that you want to do. And then you go watch some TikTok mini blogs, and then you go listen to some podcasts about it. And you're like consuming and binging information on morning routines. Okay. That is going to feel more productive. Initially, your brain is going to interpret that as being more productive because of the sensation that you're getting inside from people who are already integrated, who already know what they're doing, who have already made it a practice. And that's what you want. You want that feeling of, I know what I'm doing. I'm doing this for myself every day. I feel good when I'm engaging in this. My mornings are feeling really full. And so if you are not there yet, what your brain is going to tell you to do is consume so we can get that feeling from other people. I want to plug into all this information and all these infographics on Pinterest and all this other shit, because that will give you the feeling and sensation quickly. So it's a quick hit and that you get from doing that. And so this is why it's easy to buy into the idea that that's productive. This is what leads to stagnation for people. Big time stagnation. And so hold on. if you know that you're an overconsumer and that you have this habit, so overconsumer of information and content and whatever, again, you can know this and I can say this, but until it gets implemented, until you take action on it, it will not reach the point of integration. So it can stay in the mind. And this is why people are like, oh yeah, I know this, I want to do this, but it doesn't make it out of the mind. And so one of the things that I'm doing with people in Big Kid School is we're not sitting in the mind. We are not doing that. I refuse. Nobody in Big Kid School is going to be sitting around thinking. And it's interesting because what I could do is sit and talk to you about having the best summer ever. Or just talk about like all the fun things that are exciting and all of the cool stuff that you could do with your life and all the places you could go and all the things you could do. And I could give examples and I could talk about my personal experience and I could hype you up about how when I was having so much fun, all these manifestations started to come through. And I could like really paint you a vivid picture of all of these wonderful things. And I could just gas everyone up about that. And they would go, yeah. And they'd get so excited. And then they would move out into life. And all of a sudden it would result in paralysis. So what good is it? And that's why my focus is experience. It is practice. It is integration. That is the next stage that I'm seeing for people. And when people want to go deep and people want full lives, more information is not better. Knowing, people already know shit. People already know. People have already listened. Okay, they've done all of that stuff. Yet when they move into the part where they're supposed to take action, that's where the overwhelmment hits. And so what I'm realizing is more and more of my work is about no longer, or not no longer, it's reducing the overwhelm factor for people. And it's so funny. So earlier I was talking to a client and she took Cosmic Counsel. And the interesting thing about Cosmic Counsel is there's not much lecture in that either. It's all practice. So we sit together. I'm not running Cosmic Counsel right now, by the way, just in case you're wondering, but it's just practice. We sit together, we practice the tool that I teach in there. And so she was talking to me this morning and she was telling me in this program I ran last September, October, somewhere around there. And she was going into that practice that morning and was using all these Cosmic Counsel tools. And it was just so nice to hear that it was not conceptual, it was a part of her life. And it's something that she uses on a regular basis. Like that's where the magic lives. And so I'm just feeling very strongly these days, and the organic evolution of how this has really occurred is people need space and time and containers and help with the integration piece. And so I know that people are really addicted to information, and it's Cosmic Counsel is so much fun and such a great skill and practice. Thank you. Another Cosmic Counsel alumni on Instagram chiming in. Yes, and so this is the same thing with Apex. So one of the reasons why people are really attracted to Apex is because we're not sitting around and thinking. Like enough of that. We've all had plenty of that. Like go out, and actually putting things into practice. When people are contemplating putting things into practice, though, it is ripe for paralysis, because starting momentum is often the hardest. Getting started is the hardest. And then once it's established, it's easy. But that initial pushing of the domino, that first time that you're doing something, or the initial stages of building that skill, that's where there's the most resistance. And there's the most temptation to say, I'm going to put this down and I'm going to go consume instead, because that is actually giving me the feeling state that I am going for. And that results in it staying in the mind, and the energy doesn't move. Oh, this reminds me. I want to expand on another post that I wrote last night, where I said, the whole thing where people will say, like, you need to go outside and touch some grass. When I tell you, that is so outrageously real, because when you are just experiencing the same routine, the same four walls, the same people, the same, and it's totally mundane, the thought forms that are providing a fresh perspective are not available. The more you go out and do something unusual, or you break the status quo, you break the habit, and you shift something and do something different, new perspectives will start to emerge, because you're positioning yourself differently. And I was talking about how when you are in a routine, or you're in the same type of environment, your mind has a tendency to identify a problem. Okay, that's what it does. If you are not intentionally giving the mind something to do, it's going to find a problem and it's going to try to solve it. And what that looks like, if you're not breaking the pattern, is overthinking, analyzing. It becomes overly analytical because it doesn't have anything else to do. So if it doesn't have a project, or it doesn't have a mission, or it doesn't have a place to go, it's going to make it up, because that's the whole freaking job that it has. And unless you're like Eckhart Tolle, who can just be ultra present and monk-like, but that is a discipline, that is a skill. Like, that's a different use of the brain. But for most people, it's, if you do not offer the brain something to do and you don't give it something to focus on, it will find a problem for you. Then you're going to overanalyze. You are going to make mountains out of molehills. You're going to overthink. You're going to fixate on something. You're going to run through worst case scenarios, and it can just become a steaming pile. Okay. And this is where people, then the next step is, once you thoroughly exhaust yourself with that, the next place that people go is numbing. Like, oh, this is uncomfortable, so I need to numb. And that's what leads to overconsumption. Okay, so it's just a mess. We just have this mess with technology right now. And I don't think it'll stay that way forever. But there's a reason why people in my little online world and community talk about consumption fasting all the time. Like, it will change your life, hands down. And it's because it forces you to confront that loop that you've been on. And the interesting thing, I wrote about this last night, is that even spiritual practices that in some contexts are really supportive and can be of great help, they can they can also backfire. So if you, let's say you're not doing anything new, you have no novelty going on, and your brain starts to like collapse in on itself. It's almost like attacking itself is too strong of a word, but it's this idea of it doesn't know what else to do. You're not giving it anything to do and it just doesn't know what to do, so it makes up a problem. So the energy has somewhere to go. What was I getting at with this? My train of thought is not good today. God damn it. I'm gonna have to clean this podcast up so there's not so many gaps. When your brain doesn't know what to do, it makes up a problem. Oh, and then when you have the problem, usually what people are doing these days, or at least if you're in my sphere, is you lean on spiritual practices, right? The meditation's great, do it every day. Totally no shade to meditation. Or you can do some reframing exercises, totally good. But if you're just going stir crazy in your house and you're trying to lean on spiritual practices as a means to snuff out that discomfort, then the spiritual practices can become a part of the issue. And it's not actually solving anything. It's just another way that the brain is fixating. And so what ends up being more supportive is living life. Crazy. It's going and doing things that you've never done before. It's breaking out of the status quo. It's doing things that are novel, because you're giving your brain something else to do. But the brain, I always describe the brain as a horse that wants to be broken. It wants to be broken, and it's very susceptible to momentum. So this happened to me yesterday. This was the entire point. And it's just in time for big kid school, because it's the epitome of why this work is so important. Was I had something come up that was really emotionally sensitive to me. And so I started to spiral a little bit in the morning. I was having a hard time, having difficulty shaking it, having difficulty moving it. I was trying to wrestle with it and that wasn't really working. I talked with a friend, whatever. It was just not very effective. When I got out of the house and I went and did some things and I got some food and I went to the beach and I broke up the monotony of that experience, and I allowed myself to shift out of it by literally removing myself, going and looking at something different, because staying inside, not good for us. Too much of that right now. Then it dissolved completely. It shifted my perspective. It's like I could have just done that earlier in the day. And I'm not saying that to be hard on myself or anything like that, but sometimes that is a way more effective tool than any of the normal spiritual practices that we have. Sometimes it is just getting out and seeing something different and exposing yourself to something novel and all of that stuff. And so one of the things that I know for sure about everyone who's in big kids school is they are going to feel like life is huge. Like there's an abundance of time and there's an abundance of activities and there's so many different options. And every week I have something new to look forward to. And I know that there's way more available than I've allowed myself to play into in the place where I'm at. And I'm excited. I'm really looking forward to all of the things that begin to click into place, because everything is good. Even good things can turn sour when they're not in moderation. So even the best spiritual practices, when they're overdone, they can turn on you. Even the activities that can be really supportive for our mindset, for our well-being, it's like, when done in excess, and I'm sure many of you have had this experience as well, where it's like, yeah, it's good, and then it really is not good. And this is what many people are experiencing when it comes to overthinking. It's like overthinking or contemplation and thought are good, but then when they're in excess, it becomes a problem. And so making it a priority to break habits, like the habits of complacency, not the enriching, fulfilling morning routine, but the complacency piece, and exposing yourself to new things and going out and intentionally creating novel experiences and discovering new things. It is expansive energy. Okay, so let's talk about collapsed energy for a second, because I wrote about this last night too. When you are in an echo chamber, and a lot of the time, or the way that I described it last night was, online is full of algorithmic echo chambers, right? So when you're on TikTok and you start interacting with a few things, it just douses you in similar content. This is what leads to, I would describe it as like online social media induced psychosis that we see happening for some people. And it's because your perspective shrinks. This is a collapsing of energy. Okay, so this happens when you're hyperfixated on a problem, the energy has collapsed. When you're overthinking, or when I'm in an OCD spiral, for example, my energy has collapsed. So instead of expanding, it's now contracted, it's collapsing, and it's caving in on itself. And so this is happening in many ways. And breaking out of that is so important for us to maintain healthy relationships with consumption. Like, it is one of those things that I think will be discussed about more. In the same way, I feel like fasting will be normal, like more extended, more intense fasts when it comes to information, the way that I do consumption fast, not just social media, consumption fasting, I think will be something that becomes more normal. And giving our, like, intentionally understanding when to break out of this, because algorithms create echo chambers, and echo chambers create a collapsing of energy, and that is going against the natural flow of energy, because it wants to expand. When you're in a bad mood, or you're having some thoughts that really don't feel good, and you expand your perspective, you will feel better. You just will, because you're available for new thoughts and new perspectives and new ideas, and that inspiration can actually find you because you are not in where you've always been. Because remember, all of this is magnetic. So thoughts are magnetic. You think a thought, another one comes that is of a similar quality. So when you interrupt that, it makes it a lot easier for more diverse perspectives to find you. And that's actually what keeps us sane, because I know all of you know what I'm talking about, where if you've been exposed to too much of one kind of content, it creates hysteria. It totally creates this unhealthy, like, mob mentality. And it really does. It is like a social media and algorithm-induced sickness that a lot of people are experiencing. And so as that gains prominence, the other side of the spectrum is going to expand as well, which is what I'm trying to lean into for people. And it's what I'm trying to offer people, is a way to lean and counterbalance that, so that momentum can build in a more positive and beneficial direction for people. And yeah, I've been going for 45 minutes on this. But anyway, all of this to say that if you are trapped in the mind and you feel like you know stuff, or there's things that you want to do, or you're riding the wave of energy that you got from someone else, from listening to their content or digesting their material or reading a book or whatever, understand that integration needs to happen. And a lot of the time, novelty is better medicine than just garden variety spiritual practices. Keep meditating and doing your spiritual practices, but understand that the thing that is going to shake you loose more of the time is actually exposure to life, is going to help you more. It's going to open things up faster. And so just try it out, give it a shot, and notice when you feel yourself wanting to consume instead, because you're not going to unsee it now that I've put attention on it. Right? The brain is going to say, oh, it feels good when we go and collect information because I feel productive. You're going to notice when you're doing that now, and understand that you already know. You don't need any more information. I don't know anyone who needs more information about a lot of things. So just consider that. Understand that it's very tempting to keep gathering information, that is like where many of us are addicted. You know what I mean? And it's tempting. It's tempting because, again, what you want is that energy. You want the fullness. That's what you're after. So anyway, if you actually want fullness in life, come to Big Kid School. I am so freaking serious. So serious right now. Like, there is absolutely no way that you can dedicate time and energy and focus to actively going out and getting exposure to new things and trying new things and generating momentum and focusing on play and getting out of the house more and filling out your life in wonderful ways, that your life won't change. There's just no way. And this is one of the other reasons why I'm really excited about focusing on experience-based practices and containers for people, is because there's no guesswork. It's not like, will I consume this information and it may or may not work? Because that's what, if I just give you information, that's what will happen. But if I sit down with you and I say, okay, we are doing this, this is what you are going to do. Let's do it together right now. Let's practice together right now. There is no way it is not going to create an epic shift in your life. This is why so many people are attracted to Apex. This is why people love Cosmic Council. And this is why I know for sure that Big Kid School is going to make a difference for people, is because we're not thinking, we are not talking about it. We are not contemplating. We are not doing what the internet is constantly bombarding us with, which is more talk, like I'm doing right now, and more information and more thought. Less thought, more moving into practice. And that is going to be the thing that makes all the difference. So I'm just very excited for this season of my work. And I'm very excited for everyone who hops aboard, because there is a huge difference when people are actually like you are showing up, you have made a commitment, there's skin in the game. You are not, because of the energetic exchange at play, you are not going to be as tempted to just revert back into consumption, even though it might be tempting at times. My goal for Big Kid School is that you be more tempted and you be more enticed by the things that we will be planning together. Because you don't want, if your options are consume or be bored, consumption is going to win out. Or if your options are consume or go do this really hard thing, consumption is going to win out almost every time. Which is why it's like, okay, what's going to win out? Me laying in my cozy bed or running 10 miles this morning? It's like, this is why enticing things, that's where people are getting really stumped. And so that's what I want to solve for everyone, is creating a life that is more enticing than consumption. That is what we are doing. Life is going to be rich and full and yummy and fun and enticing as hell. And it is something where you're going to be excited to actually move into the world and get after it. And so this is the piece where people have not actively been building this skill. And so this is what we're going to be doing. Anyway, we start June 1st. Yes, ma'am. We start June 1st. Link in my bio, link in show notes, you know the drill, all that good stuff. If you have any questions, please reach out. I would be happy to answer them for you. And that is a wrap, everyone. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.